How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Vav, Daf 36 of Masechta Zevachim. Friends, today in Daf Lamed Vav we finish the third parak of Masechta Zevachim, which means tomorrow we will be beginning the fourth. There's really, I'd say, one main sugya, on today's daf. I'd say primarily, there's lots of other kind of, there's a lot of stuff on today's daf, but I would say it all kind of like weaves into really this main question about leaving blood overnight. Leaving blood overnight, or really the intention to leave blood overnight. This had come up a few, I would say about a week and a half ago already. This had come up, that we're going to see this machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda about if you have a machshava, a thought to leave blood overnight, if that would make the korban puzzle or not. That is going to be in the context of a Mishnah, which has several more parts to it. But again, as I said, I think really today's daf is going to be kind of weaving in and out of, I think, really that main topic of the machlokas between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda about the kavana, the machshava, to leave the blood overnight without doing zrikas adam. Chever, let us jump in to Daf Lamed Vav of Masechta Zevachim, and to complete the third parak of Masechta Zevachim, here we go. Friends, our journey begins on Daf Lamed Hey Amid Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. At the Mishnah, Shachatoi al Manas laniach as Damo O, Emur of Lamacher O, Lotzin Lachutz Rabbi Yehuda Pos of Chacham Machshirin. That is the line, or lines, whatever, that I was referring to primarily in the introduction. So says the Mishnah, I'll read it again, Shachto al Manas laniach as Damo, that if a person slaughters a korban with the intention to leave the blood. So let me actually, you know what? How about this, Chaver? What do you think about this? Jump to the end of the Mishnah. Jump to the end of the Mishnah, Daf Lamed Vav, Amud Aleph, about 5 lines into Daf Lamed Vav, Amud Aleph. Let's just read the end of the Mishnah and then we'll get back to the beginning. She'ein machshava poselis ela b'chutz lezmana v'chutz limkomo v'pesach v'chatas shelo lishman. That the only machshavas that are going to be posel by a korban is the machshava of chutz lizmano, chutz limkomo, right? Which we know we're talking about achilas mizbeach or achilas adam, right? Or of course, as we know from the first Mishnah in the Masechta, by korban pesach or korban chatas, if there is a kavana shelo lishma. But the point that I'm making is that the only machshavas, right, the only thoughts, right, pigul, as we've talked about, pigul, the whole thing with pigul is that it's like a thought. You have a thought to do something. So the only thought that's going to make pigul is thoughts of chutz lezmano, chutz limkomo, in the context of achilas adam or achilas mizbeach. Any machshava about, I'm just going to leave over some blood until tomorrow, well, that's not achilas adam, it's not achilas mizbeach. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says that would be possible. Right? Having machshava. I guess the Chacham say that it's kosher, right? So Chacham machshir, and Chacham say it's kosher. Rabbi Yehuda nonetheless says that it's possible. Rabbi Yehuda nonetheless says that the Chachamim say that it's kosher, right? Based on that line that we just talked about at the end of the Mishnah, that right, this is neither. Right. This is not achilas adam or achilas mizbech. Rabbi Yehuda nonetheless says, however, that even though it's not achilas adam or achilas mizbech, still, when it comes to leaving the blood, right, and he's not saying I'm going to do zrikas tam tomorrow. He said, I'm just going to leave it to tomorrow. I'm just leaving it overnight. So that, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that alone would make the korban possible, right? So whether it's about the blood, whether it's about the emurin, right, the parts that are supposed to be burnt on the mizbech, he just says, I'm going to leave it overnight. Or if he has a machshava, I'm going to take it out of the azar. It doesn't say I'm going to burn it out of the azar or do the zrikas adama. No, I'm just going to take it out of the azar. So there's no achilas adam or achilas mizbeach over there. Nonetheless, Rabbi Yehuda says that it will be possible. Chachamim say it's going to be kosher because as we quote at the end of the Mishnah, you would have to have a kavana of pigul, essentially, chutz mizmanu, chutz limkomo, to have kind of achilas odom or achilas mizbech, and this is none of those, right? It's just leaving the blood or leaving the emur and just taking it out of the azar, but not actually doing anything with it. So Rabbi Yehuda says, nonetheless, it's possible. We're going to have to discuss in the Gemara why, but the Chacham say that it's kosher because it's not a disqualifying machshava. Let's read that again. Shachatoi almanas leaniach es damo. Right, so a person slaughters a korban with the intention of simply just leaving the blood, not doing anything with it, just leaving it till tomorrow. Oh, emur of lemachor, just leaving the emurin till tomorrow. Again, not to burn them tomorrow, just leave them till tomorrow. So I'm just going to take him out of the azar. What are you going to do with him there? It doesn't say anything. Just I'm taking it out of the azar. Rabbi Yehuda says the korban is possible. The Chacham say, no, that this is kosher. This is not a machshava that is going to make the korban possible according to Chacham. Al-Minas, litnon al-gabi ha-kevish, right? These are concepts that we dealt with around a week and a half ago, right? If a person slaughters a korban with the intention I'm slaughtering this korban, and instead of doing the zrikas hadam properly, I'm going to do zrikas hadam on the kevish, I'm going to throw the blood on the ramp of the mizbech, which is not where it belongs. Shelo keneged yesod, or on the southeastern corner of the mizbech where there's no yesod, also not the right place. As we know about the chut hasikra, I'm not going to pull out the diagrams again. Where did we have the diagrams? Probably on Daf Chav. Was that maybe Daf Chav Zayin? Maybe, I don't know. Somewhere around there, we had some diagrams. You could find them if you need to. But anyways, if a person slaughters a korban with the intention of throwing the blood above the chut hasikra when it's supposed to be below the chut hasikra, below the chut hasikra when it's supposed to be above the chut hasikra. Of course, the chut hasikra being that red line halfway up the side of the mizbeach. V'sanitonim bifnim bachutz, v'sanitonim bachutz bifnim. That a korban, that its blood is supposed to be thrown inside of the heichol. For example, a parlam davar shel tzibor, or par kohen Mashiach, or sayir avodah zara for the community, or the par v'sayir of Yom Kippur. So the blood is supposed to be inside of the heichol, but he throws it on the mizbeach hachitzon, does rikas on the mizbeach hachitzon, or fakir, supposed to be on the mizbeach hachitzon, he does it inside the heichol. Shochlu tnei, or a person slaughters a korban with the kavanah that who's going to eat it? Tummy people are going to eat it. Shekrivu tmeim, or that tummy people are going to offer it, are going to burn it. Sheochlu arelim, or uncircumcised men are going to eat it. Veshakrivu arelim, or that arelim will be the ones to burn it on the mizbech. L'shaber atzmis apaisich, a person slaughters a korban pesach with the intention of breaking the bones. Of course, the pasuk says by korban pesach. Let's see if I remember it. Lo yisoichlu memenu no uvasham vusham amayim ve'etzim lo sizbru bo. Hopefully, I don't remember. Did I just merge different psukim or something? I don't know. But it says that korban pesach cannot be eaten raw, right? Lo yisoichlu memenu uvasham vusham lo yisoichlu memenu no uvasham vusham amayim ki im tzliyesh rosho akro v'al kirbo something. And it also says ve'etzim lo sizbru bo, you can't break any bones. So what if a person slaughters a korban pesach with the intention of breaking the bones of the korban pesach? Or what if he slaughters the korban pesach with the intention of eating it raw? Right? So again, l'shaber atzmis hapaisich, that he slaughters a korban pesach with the intention of breaking its bones, which you're not allowed to do. Lechol imenu no, or to eat it raw, it's got to be roasted. Where a person slaughters a korban with the intention of mixing its blood with blood of pasul korbanos. In all of those scenarios, friends, what do you say? If I asked you all these scenarios, what did you say? Kosher or pasul? Obviously, you're going to say kosher, because as we read earlier, she'ein machshava poseles ela b'chutz hazman v'chutz l'komo. the only machshavas, the only thoughts that are going to passel a korban, right? I mean, thoughts. I mean, there's other things that can make a korban possible, but in terms of just like you have an idea, you have a thought, and your thought alone is going to passel the korban. Those thoughts are chutz lizmano and chutz limkomo. Big old thoughts, right? But just simply, to have a kavanah of throwing the blood in the wrong place, that is not chutz lizmano, chutz limkomo. Obviously, when we're talking about chutz limkomo, we're talking about eating it or burning things outside of the azar, and not chutz limkomo, like it's supposed to be below the chut hasikra and you do it above. It's not the wrong place of the mizbech. We're talking about the wrong location, actually like outside of the azar. Now, and of course, as we know already from the first Mishnah of Masechta Zevachim, a korban pesach or korban chatos that were slaughtered shelo lishman, that will also make a korban pasul. However, any of those other examples listed in the Mishnah will not make a korban pasul. Of course, Rabbi Yehuda had argued in the first line of the Mishnah, when it comes to leaving blood over, or leaving a murin over, or simply having an idea to just take something out of the azar but not do anything with it there, Rabbi Yehuda says there it will be pasul as well. And again, as I've mentioned in the introduction, that is really, I would say, going to be the main topic of today's daf, as we now enter in and move ahead with the Gemara of today's daf. So now the Gemara wants to know, my time with Rabbi Yehuda, what's pshat with Rabbi Yehuda? Right? Because, we just ended off the Mishnah, right, with that last line of the Mishnah that I also mentioned at the beginning of the Mishnah about the only machshavas that are going to be postal korban, machshavas chutz l'zmano, chutz l'mkomo. All of a sudden, Rabbi Yehuda is saying that even a thought of just leaving the blood overnight is going to make the korban postal. Where does he get this from? My time with Rabbi Yehuda, how come Rabbi Yehuda says this? Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, Trey Kraiksive, because there are two verses. Benoser, when it comes to noser, who could tell me what noser is? Noser is leaving a korban past its time. Noser, right? So we have one pasuk by korban pesach, and another pasuk by korban toda, right? That if you're right, korban pesach has to be eaten that night. Lo sosir mumenu ad boka, as we're about to see. Korban Pesach has to be eaten on Pesach night at the Seder. Don't leave it till the morning. Also, Korban Toda, right? You eat biyom zivcha. What does it say? Biyom korbanu ye'ochel le'anich menu ad boka. It says by Korban Toda. Also by Korban Toda, don't leave it over till the morning. So again, Trei Kroik Siv ben Noser, there are two psukim written by Noser, two psukim written when a korban is left over past the time it's meant to be eaten. Because of Echad Omer, one pasuk says by korban pesach, those asir menu ad boker, don't leave it over till the morning. Because of Echad Omer, and a second pasuk says le'aniach menu ad boker, by korban toda, it says don't leave it over till the morning. Now this second pasuk, imenu inyan le'aniach, now argues Rabbi Yehuda, well, if that second pasuk is not needed to teach me don't leave a korban over past the time it's meant to be eaten, we saw that already by korban pesach. Why repeat itself by korban toda? Well, if it's not needed to teach me, don't leave it over. Well, then say, you know what it's talking about? Even just having a machshove, even just thinking to leave it over is enough to make the korban pasul. One second. This pasuk by Korban Toda, is it really needed to teach me about machsheves hinuach, about having a machshava of leaving the blood or the emurim overnight to say that the korban is pasul? Is that really what the pasuk is teaching me? 1 second. I need this pasuk by Korban Toda to teach me the following. As we learn in the Brayso, Uvsar Zevach Todas Shlomo. That this is the pasuk. I'm going to read you the pasuk, friends. Listen up. I'm going to read you the pasuk. This is the pasuk by Korban Toda. It says, Uvsar Zevach Todas Shlomo. The meat of a Korban Toda. B'yom Korbanu Ye'ochel. You have to eat it the day that it is offered. Right, a korban toda, korban shlomim. Okay, we've learned that. Right, I think from this passage it says zevach toda shlomav. Right, we've learned earlier in the Masechta that a korban toda is a type of a korban shlomim. Now, a korban shlomim is eaten for 2 days, but a korban toda is eaten for 1 day and the accompanying following night. It has to be in that day. Don't leave it over till the morning. So now we have a brayse that says that the flesh of a korban toda so that teaches us that a korban toda is eaten that day and the following night. Right? Means that okay, meaning the pasuk says so teaches Davka specifically by korban toda that the korban toda itself is eaten for the day that it's offered and the following night. Chalifin, vladis, tmuris, minayin. How do you know that the same is for chalifin, vladis, and tmuris? That they are also for that the day that they are offered and the accompanying night. Chalifin would be, who could tell me what chalifin is? Who could tell me what chalifin is? Chalifin would be if you have a korban toda and the korban toda runs off. And now you're like, oh shoot, where did my korban toda go? Alright, so you take a different animal and you say, okay fine, you're going to be my korban toda, and then you find the original. So now you have two animals. So they're both going to be offered as korbanis. Vladis would be if your korban toda has a baby. Tmuris would be if you say, oh, you know what? So you say, okay, Reuven the sheep, you're going to be my korban toda. And then you say, actually, you know what? I want Shimon the sheep to be my korban toda. And you say, okay, Shimon the sheep, you're going to be my korban toda. That's what's a tmura, right? You're going to say, right, raise Zot, tmura Zot, right? I'm going to bring you, and I'm going to bring Shimon the sheep instead of Reuven the sheep. Now you have to, so you offer both of them. So so by Chalif and Vladis and Tmuris, when they are offered, also they are to be eaten the day they are offered plus the following night. Minayin, how do you know that? Tamalomer uvsar, because the pasuk says uvsar, and I think that is extra, right? Or is it not? I think it's extra. Why not be extra? What does Rashi say? Uvsar da'avele limichtav visodaso b'yom. Right. Okay. Yeah, it's extra. So we can learn out. So that is what is. So from the uvsar we learn out chalif and vladis and tmuris. Chatos ve'asham minayin. How do we know that a korban chatos is eaten for one day and the following night, as well as a korban asham, right? That's the halacha by chatos and asham. Minayin, how do we know this? Tamalomer zevach, because it says zevach to include chatoses and ashamses. Minayin the rabbis shalmei nazir v'shalmei pesach. Okay, how do we know also to include the korban shlomim of a nazir? Right, a nazir brings a ola shlomim. And maybe I'm going to go with Asham? I don't know, either an Asham or a Chatas. I think an Asham. I'd have to look it up. Anyways, but the Shlomim of a Nazir would only be in for one day, as well as Shalmei Pesach. That's Chagigas Yudalit, I believe. That is that is the Korban Shlomim that is brought together with the Korban Pesach. Well, meaning, if you have a big Suda, you have a big Seder with lots of guests, so you'll also have more meat there, so you'll bring a Shalmei, a Chagigas Arba Osir. Anyways, that would be in for that day, right? The day that it's offered, and basically eat it at the Seder. So Shalmei Nozev and Shalmei Pesach, Tamlomer Shlomov. That Shlomov, I guess that's plural, and that refers to Shalmei Nozer and Shalmei Pesach, also are eaten for that day and the following night. Lachmei Toda v'chales v'rikikim shebenozir minayin. The breads of a korban toda. Of course, a korban toda is offered with 40 breads, and a nazir has also chalas and rokiks. I think chalas and rokiks are, a minchas maifes soner. I imagine we're going to learn all about that in Masechta Menachos, which is not quite around the corner, but I think we're about now 25-30% of the way through. I think we're between 25 and 30%. So I guess 27.5% of the way or so through Masechta Zevachim. And after Masechta Zevachim, of course, Masechta Menachos, which I'm finishing Masechta Menachos in the Mishnayos now. Actually, I'm on the second to last Mishnah of Masechta Menachos. Friends, anybody who's interested, Mishnah Yomi is a gewaltige Zach. 2 Mishnayos a day. just 2 Mishnayos a day. And lat. I've already learned. I've been doing it for a few months. I've learned Masechta. It's funny. I literally started. They were like up to what we were doing. I literally started basically at Masechta Horius. So I've learned Horius, Zevachim, and Menachos. I think is what I've learned so far. So lat 2 Mishnayos a day, but you get good Bekiyas that way. Anyways, v'chazor kikim shebenazir minayin. Right? It's like I was like, oh, chalas and rokiks. That's a minchos mai fesonur. Shtickle Bekiyas from Masechta Menachos. Hopefully I picked up something. Akoponim. Minayin, how do we know that they're also eating for one day in the following night time? Lomer korbano, kulan korani boin lo yaniach. All right, Seder in all those cases, don't leave it till the next day, i.e., eat it only on the day that it is offered, and the following night, don't leave it till the morning. So we used that pasuk from a korban toda to learn all sorts of halachis. We use that pasuk by korban toda to learn out all sorts of korbanos that are eaten for one day. So to say like, oh well, what do we need that pasuk for? Let's just say it's talking about machshavas hinuach. What do you mean? That pasuk is teaching us about 1,000,001 things. So imkain lema kr lo sosiru. Yeah, but we could have learned out all of those things while also saying lo sosiru mimenu ad boker. Why dafka lo yaniach? Why use the word, right? The pasuk by Korban Pesach says lo sosiru mimenu ad boker. Why not use the same word, the same lashon by Korban Toda as well? Why say lo yaniach? My lo yaniach im eno inin lihinuach. Well, if it's not saying don't leave it over till the morning, because we already know don't leave it over till the morning. Leave it over just to the thought. So say it's talking about just even the thought of leaving it till the morning is going to make it possible. But 1 second. That Rabbi Yehuda had argued and said the korban is possible in 3 scenarios. 2 of them were about leaving over. Don't leave the blood over till the morning. Don't leave the emurin over till the morning. Sure. But there was a 3rd scenario. Don't take the blood or the emurin out of the azara. Right? Well, if you slaughter a korban with the machshava to take the blood or the emurim outside of the azara, Rabbi Yehuda says possible. How do we know that? Right? To learn out from the korban toda, that would only teach me a machshava hinuach by the blood, by the emurim. It won't teach me about a machshava about taking the blood of the emurim outside of the azara. Ve'od, and more so. Ve'od, and more so. Taima de Rabbi Yehuda svaru. And you know what? At the end of the day, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is simply a svara. It is simply, it's just an argument, really. The sign is one in the Brisa. Amar Loim, Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Yehuda says to them, he uses his logic, tries to use his noggin to reason with them. It's not learned that from a pasuk. Rather, Rabbi Yehuda says to them, Iatemodim, don't you people admit that if he leaves the blood over till the next day, that it's going to be possible? Don't you agree? So, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda argues, well, if leaving it over till tomorrow is going to be possible, well, then even just having a thought to leave it over will also make it possible. So other times Rabbi Yehuda Svarahu, so the Gemara amends its approach and says, you know what, Taka, Rabbi Yehuda is not learnt out from psukim, from korban toda. It is simply a svara. It is simply logic. That is the driving force behind Rabbi Yehuda's opinion to say possible by machshavas hinuach, by machshavas yotze. It's simply logic. He says, well, don't you agree that it will be possible if it happens? Well, therefore, he wants to argue that even the thought of it happening would be enough to make the korban possible. So now the Gemara suggests, v'niflog nami Rabbi Yehuda b'chulu. Why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda argue on the whole Mishnah? Why is he only arguing on the first 3 things in the Mishnah? Argue on the whole Mishnah. Behei niflog, to which the Gemara says, well, what exactly do you want him to argue about? Beshover atzmus ha-pesach, v'lecho mimenu no? What, do you want him to say that if a person slaughters a korban pesach with the intention of breaking its bones when eating it, or with the intention to cook it raw, the korban will be possible? But that's preposterous. Zivcha gufe mi mifsil, But says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Okay, I gotta fix my shirt because it's rubbing into my head. And I'm nervous that by doing so, it's gonna mess with the mic. Okay, so the Gemara says, what? Do you really think that Rabbi Yehuda would say that merely slaughtering a korban with the intention of that when I'm eating it, I'm going to break its bones, or I'm going to cook it raw, that would make the korban puzzle? Hey, brother, even if he would actually do those things, even if he actually would break the bones or would eat it raw, the korban would not be puzzle. Meaning, Chevre, what's the most important thing when it comes to a korban, friends? Zrikas Adam. By the point at which he would break a bone when eating it, or eating it raw, that's already passed. He's already brought it to the Beis Hamikdash, slaughtered it, done Zrikas Adam. He's already yotzei the mitzvah of korban Pesach. Well, how about this? I wouldn't say that necessarily, but I don't know. Is he already yotzei the mitzvah of korban Pesach? I mean, there is a mitzvah to eat korban Pesach, but anyways, in terms of the korban itself, though, even if he eats it raw, the korban itself was offered properly. You then ate it improperly, but you don't need. Generally, when it comes to korbanos, there's other requirements when it comes to korban Pesach, but in general, when it comes to a korban, let's say a person brings a korban chatas. The atonement of the korban chatas is the zrikas adam. Afterwards, whether the kohanim eat it, whether they burn the emurim, that's not going to make the korban puzzle. So therefore, the Gemara says, what you're going to say that Rabbi Yehuda says that if you have a machshava to break its bones, the korban should be puzzle. Even if he did break the bones, the korban wouldn't be puzzle. The zrikas adam was already done kosherly. Even if a person were to eat it raw, again, the korban itself would be kosher. Almanas, where am I? Right? If a person slaughters a korban under the condition that tamei people will eat it, or tamei people will burn the emurim, again, the same argument. Eating it, tameim burning the emurim, these are already after the zrikas adam. By that point, the korban has already been offered properly. These are not things that are going to make the korban puzzle. Again, any kavanah that arelim will offer it or eat it. Again, it's after the zrikas adam. It's not going to make the korban puzzle. The korban itself is kosher. Having that kavanah at the time when you slaughter it, that a orel is going to eat it, is not going to make it puzzle. Because even if an orel does eat it, the korban itself is not going to be puzzle. Alternatively, kol kamine. First of all, is it in his power to do so? That's a reference to, for example, okay, I'm understanding this Gemara a little bit differently than the 5 times I've learned it before. Okay, I think it's going on the previous thing. Okay, each time I learn this Gemara, I understand it slightly more. I've learned this Gemara several times. Okay, anyways, lishna achrina kol kamine. Okay, I think it's going on the previous thing, right? So meaning, we had said when it comes to a tamei person eating the korban or offering the korban, an orel eating the korban or offering the korban, we said, well, even if they would do it, the korban would still be kosher anyways. Having the kavanah that this is going to happen is not going to ruin it, because even if they did it, it wouldn't make the korban puzzle. Alternatively, lishnachrina kol kamine, is it in his power to even force him to do it? Keilu, yeah, sure. Let's say he slaughters the korban with the intention that a tamei person is going to eat it, but I mean, he can't force the tamei kohen to eat it, or yeah, it's very nice. Meaning, if he's slaughtering the korban with the intention to do zrikas adam chutz zman, okay, he could do that. It's up to him. But for the intention of having somebody else who's tamei eat it, I mean, what if they don't want him? La'ariv daman b'dam psulin. And if he has kavana during the shchita that he's going to mix the blood together with puzzle blood, Rabbi Yehuda time of damer ain dam avatal dam. Right? I think, what was it, yesterday we saw it, or the day before, Rabbi Yehuda says that blood is not mevatel. I think maybe it was 2 days ago, that blood is not mevatel blood. Meaning, so even if the kosher dam is mixed together with puzzle dam, Rabbi Yehuda says still, I mean, the kosher dam is still going to be kosher. And if he's going to have kavana that the blood that should be above, he's going to put below, that's supposed to be below, he's going to put above. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, like we saw, the opinion of Shmuel and the opinion of, was it maybe Rish Lakish, that shalom kom kim komo, that even the wrong part of the mizbeach we would treat like the right part of the mizbeach. So also it wouldn't make the korban puzzle. V'liflog, at least not in terms of kapara. V'liflog b'nitanim b'fnim shenesanim b'chutz v'nitanim b'chutz shenesanim b'fnim. Okay, maybe if he has kavana that he's going to throw the blood inside, outside, the blood's supposed to be outside, inside. The thing is, Chaver, we learned recently that when it comes to chutz l'mkomo, right, and that's what we're talking about over here, right, outside, it should be outside the heichol, inside the heichol. When it comes to, or outside the azar, really, meaning the zrikas adam, right, if it needs to be done in the azara, so it has to be done in the azara. It can't be done outside azara, right? That would be chutz l'mkomo, right? If a person slaughters a korban with the intention of doing zrikas adam outside of the azara, that would be chutz l'mkomo. We learned recently, though, that in order for something to qualify as the wrong place for chutz l'mkomo, it has to have three characteristics. One is it has to be a place where you can burn the meat, do zrikas adam, and I think also eat it, right? Are we going to say it over here? Bedam, bibasar, uveimurim. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, burn the emurim, do zrikas adam, and I think eat the meat. So, for example, when it comes to a bama, right, during the periods when one was allowed to make a private altar in one's backyard, so you would do all these things. You would eat the meat in your backyard. You would do zrikas adam in your backyard. You would burn the emurim in your backyard. So, in order for for a place to qualify for chutz l'mkomo, it has to be a place where all those three things apply, where you could do those three things. The shaila was, what about if a person slaughters a korban with the intention of doing zrikas adam in the heichel, on the mizbach azov, in the heichel? Well, the heichel is a place, sure, where you do zrikas adam, but you don't burn korbanos there, you don't eat korbanos in the heichel. So therefore, we saw the opinion that the heichel actually would not qualify as a place for chutz l'mkomo, that if one slaughters a korban shlomim, let's say, with the intention of doing zrikas adam in the heichel, that would not be considered chutz l'mkomo. So therefore, if we're saying that it would not be chutz l'mkomo in terms of pigel, right, for machshavas chutz l'mkomo. So therefore, to suggest that Rabbi Yehuda would say that if one slaughters a korban with the intention of a korban that the zrikas adam is supposed to be b'chutz, but the intention of doing it b'fnim, his opinion is that machshava of the heichol is not considered chutz l'mkomo. Kasav Rabbi Yehuda holds ba'inon makom sheyeh mishulash b'dam b'basav emurim. The Rabbi Yehuda holds that in terms of the puzzle machshava of chutz l'mkomo, the target of the machshava, the place where you're intending, the wrong place that you're intending, has to be a place where dam is thrown, flesh is eaten, emurim are burnt. The heichol is not such a place. Zrikas adam happens in the heichol, but not haktaris emurim, not achilas basar. But does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that? Maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds that machshava of the heichal is chutz l'mkomo. V'atani, we learned about Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Yehuda, when it comes to mums, it says called davar ra, all bad stuff. Ribakan chatas sheshchata b'darim, included in bad stuff is the korban chatas that's slaughtered in the south of the azara. Of course, as we know, kodshei kodshim shchitasim batzofin, that kodshei kodshim, including a korban chatas, are slaughtered in the north of the azara. And when we say davar ra, bad things, that includes a chatas that is slaughtered in the south of the azara, that it is pasul. V'chatas shenichnas dam lifnim psula, as well as a chatas that its blood went into the eichel, and it's not. We have a different pasuk to say, right? Kochatas shenichnas sheyavo pnima. I butchered that pasuk, but we have a different pasuk to say that the blood of a chatas is not allowed to go into the heichel. So this pasuk is not teaching that. Rather, it's teaching about the machshava. That, i.e., says Rabbi Yehuda, right? Again, Vatani Rabbi Yehuda Omer Davra Riba Kan Chata Sheshchata Badarim V'Chata Shenichnas Dam Lefnim Psula. That says Rabbi Yehuda that even machshava of bringing the blood of a korban chatas, a chatas that's supposed to be in the azara, even the machshava of bringing the blood of that chatas into the heichel would make the korban possible. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda does hold that a machshava of chutz limkomo of michutz lifnim would make it possible. But wait 1 second. Is that really true that he would say that it's possible? We learn in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hichnis b'shogeg kosher, that if one brings the blood into the heichal by accident, the korban is still kosher. B'meizid possible. But if it was intentional, if one intentionally brought the blood of the korban into the heichal, it would be possible. Meaning, if it's a korban that's not allowed to go into the heichal. V'kaimel, we hold b'shakiper, that when is this blood that was intentionally brought into the heichal going to be possible? B'shakiper, when he dafka did zrikas adam. But if he didn't do zrikas adam, so meaning if he intentionally brought the blood of, let's say, echatas into the heichal, he intentionally brought it into the heichal, but did not do zrikas adam, then it would not be possible. So if in that case, the case where one intentionally brought the blood of a korban chatas into the heichal, he mamish brought it into the heichal intentionally, but he keeper in ilo keeper lo. But still, even so, it's only going to be possible if he actually did zrikas adam in the heichal. Well then, Well then, here where he's merely thinking, he's just using his mind, he's certainly not doing zrikas adam or anything, certainly then it will be kosher. Right? We're saying that, right? Meaning, even when he mamish brings the blood into the heichal, it's only going to be possible if he actually did zrikas adam. Well, then simply having a machshava to do zrikas adam in the heichal is going to still be kosher. So, what is it? Does Rabbi Yehuda say that the machshava of bringing the blood into the eichel, when it's supposed to be in the azar, but he has kabbalah to bring it to the eichel, is it kosher? Is it possible? What is it? So Trei Tanoi Valibud Rabbi Yehuda, it's two Tanoim reporting the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. It's a machlokas, right? You had two Tanas who were saying that this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and they disagreed they were inconsistent. One was saying that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that machshava of chutz l'mkomo, when we're talking about the heichal, is possible. The other opinion was that it is kosher. So now Rabbi Yehuda had said that a korban chatos that is slaughtered in the south of the azara is possible. Does Rabbi Yehuda really say that a korban chatos that is slaughtered in the south of the azara is really possible? We learned by Rabbi Yehuda, is it possible that you'd be chayiv for slaughtering a korban chatas in the south? In the south of the azar. Lo sizbach laHashem lekecha shor baset v'gomer. Don't slaughter to Hashem kol davar ra, any bad thing. Al davar ra atom chayiv. You're chayiv for mums, for blemishes. V'atom chayivo al chatas sheshchada b'darim. But you're not chayiv for korban chatas that was simply slaughtered in the south of the azar. So on the one hand, Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you'd be chayiv for a korban chatas that's slaughtered in the south of the azar. On the other hand, he's saying that you're not. So what do you say? Once again, there were two Tanoim that were saying Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and they seem to have not been in sync, which I guess supports the notion for why Rebbe wrote down the Mishnayos so that there wouldn't be such confusions. Okay, Cheved, now this next section arguably gets a little tricky. This next section, we might have to use our brains a little bit. Here we go. Amar Babble says Babble. Umode Rabbi Yehuda Shechozer v'kovo lepigol. Okay, this is very, very interesting. Very, 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 very interesting. Okay, basically, as we know, when it comes to pigol, right? So, for example, if you slaughter a korban with the intention that you're going to eat the korban chutz lizman. Right? If you slaughter the korban, let's say it's a korban shlomim, you can eat it for 2 days. If you slaughter the korban shlomim with the intention of eating the korban on day 3, when it's too late. So of course that's pigul. But what if then you do Kabbalah Sadam with the intention of eating the korban chutz limkomo, outside of Yerushalayim? Well, then we say it's no longer pigul because it has to have, right, you have to actually carve kol matirin. That all of, right, it has to be all of the other steps have to be done properly. If you have shchita chutz lizmano, and of course Kabbalah chutz limkomo, that would be possible. It would not be pigul. There would be no chiyuv kares. Now, it says Rabbi Abba that while Rabbi Yehuda holds that if one slaughters a korban with the intention of simply leaving the blood overnight, so the Chacham had said that the korban's kosher, right? Because it's not chutz lizmanu, chutz limkomo. Rabbi Yehuda says that the korban is nonetheless possible. However, Rabbi Abba says something very interesting, which is, but nonetheless, even though Rabbi Yehuda would say that the korban is possible, if he then does Kabbalah Sadam with the intention of eating the korban chutz lizmanu, it would still be pigul and there would still be chayiv kares, right? Meaning, if one would slaughter the korban with the intention of eating the korban, let's say it's a korban shlomim, he slaughters with the intention of eating it outside of Yerushalayim. So that would be chutz limkomo, but the korban would be possible. Now, since the korban is possible because of chutz limkomo, if then he does the Kabbalah Sadam with the intention of eating the korban chutz lizmano on day 3, it would be possible. There wouldn't be chayiv kares. It wouldn't be pigul. It would be possible. There wouldn't be a chayiv kares since it was already possible from the shchita, which was chutz limkomo. So the chiddush here is that, according to Rabbi Yehuda, even though he says that slaughtering the korban with the intention of leaving the blood over would make it possible, but it's not possible on the same level of like chutz limkomo. Chutz limkomo is possible to the extent that if he now does Kabbalah Sadam chutz lizmano, it would not be pigul, it would be possible. However, says Rabbi Abba, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, even though he would say that if you slaughter the korban with the intention of simply leaving over the blood, the korban would be possible. Nonetheless, if he does Kabbalah Sadam with the intention of chutz lizmano, it would still be pigul. We wouldn't say, well, it's already possible, it's not going to be pigul anymore. No, it would still be pigul. So again, Amr Rabbi says, Rabbi Yehuda admits that even though we slaughtered the korban with the intention of leaving the blood over, and Rabbi Yehuda says that the korban is possible, nonetheless, if he then does Kabbalah Sadam with the intention of chutz lizmano, it would still be pigul, and there would be a chiyuv kares. Rava Teda, Teda says over, you should know that Taka Rabbi Abba is on the ball, that Rabbi Abba is right, because if you think about it, the pigul lifnei zrika lo klumhu, Rav makes an interesting statement, which is that if you think, how does pigul work? How does pigul work? Well, if a person slaughters a korban, right? If a person were to slaughter a korban with the intention of doing zrika sadam tomorrow, that would be chutz lizmano, it would be pigul, and there would be a chiyuv kares. So that a person slaughters a korban with the intention of doing zrika sadam tomorrow, pigul, and there's a chiyuv kares. But now, as we've learned, you're actually not yet chayiv. Well, first of all, you're chayiv kares only if you eat it, right? Otherwise, you're, I think, chayiv makas. But anyways, when does it actually? It's not actually pigul yet. If a person slaughters a korban and has in mind during the shechita that I'm going to be doing Kabbalah, I'm going to be doing Zrika Sadam tomorrow, it's not yet pigul. Friends, when does it become pigul? Who wants to tell us? Who wants to volunteer? When does it become pigul? only after the Zrikas Adam. So meaning, so a person slaughters the korban as intention that I'm going to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow. Now, even if he doesn't actually do Zrikas Adam tomorrow, so he does Kabbalah Adam, Malachas Adam, he now goes to the Mizbech, he does Zrikas Adam properly right now, not tomorrow, but now. At that point, after the Zrikas Adam as is complete, only at that point does the animal become pigul. That's the halach. We've learned it before. That it's not yet pigul immediately upon the machshava. It becomes pigul when the Zrikas Adam is done. And the chiddush of part of the chiddush of pigul is that even though he ended up doing the Zrikas Adam properly, he did the Zrikas Adam now, but since at the time of the shechita he had in mind that I'm going to do the Zrikas Adam tomorrow, even though he didn't end up doing it, but that was his kavanah at the time of shechita. So once he does Zrikas Adam now, the korban becomes pigul. So says Rav, the interesting thing about pigul is that, so what happens? A person slaughters a korban. He has in mind at the time of shechita, I'm going to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow. But it's not yet pigul. It only becomes pigul when he then does the Zrikas Adam. Now, Chevra, what's something that's very interesting about it? If you dig deep, Chevra, what's interesting? He slaughters the korban with the intention, I'm going to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow. Chevra, in order to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow, what do you need to do with the blood? You have to leave it overnight. Which Rabbi Yehuda is saying is possible. It's gewaldig, right? Kilu, baked in bichlal to the whole concept of pigul is that you're going to leave it overnight, right? A person slaughters a korban with the intention, I'm going to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow. Essentially what he's saying is, I'm going to leave it overnight and do Zrikas Adam tomorrow. And yet, when he then does Zrikas Adam now, at that point it becomes established as pigul. Basically, what Rava wants to argue is, what do we see? That essentially a machshava of hinuach, a machshava that I'm going to leave it overnight in order to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow. But the part of the machshava of I'm going to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow is I'm also going to leave it overnight, and yet it still becomes pigul once he does the Zrikas Adam right now. It becomes established as pigul, even though essentially he was also having the kavanah of I'm going to leave it overnight, and that didn't preclude the korban from becoming pigul. Very, very interesting argument. Again, Amar Rava says, Rava Teida, you should know that Rabbi Abba is right, that even though Rabbi Yehuda says that the slaughtering a korban with the machshava of I'm going to leave the blood overnight, even though Rabbi Yehuda says that machshava makes the korban pasul, however, if he then does the Kabbalah Sadam with the machshava of chutz zmana, it would still be pigul, and the fact that he had a machshava of hinuach, of leaving it overnight, isn't going to preclude the korban from becoming pigul, because Teida, you should know, the whole concept of pigul, the pigul if nezrika lo klumhu, that before the actual zrikas adam of the korban, the thought of pigul doesn't yet make it pigul until Zrikas Adam. And what's the thought of pigul? I'm going to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow. And what's part of that thought is I'm going to leave it over till tomorrow so that I can do Zrikas Adam tomorrow. And comes Zrikas Adam, when you actually do the Zrikas Adam now, right? And by doing Zrikas Adam now, it now establishes that pigul, even though part of what your thought was at the time of the shechita was that essentially I'm going to leave it overnight, that doesn't seem to be preventing pigul. Wow, beautiful question. Beautiful svara, but nonetheless, Veloi, that's not true. Hasam chada machshava hi hacha trei machshavas. However, as beautiful as a svara that was from Rava, nonetheless, they are different. When a person slaughters a korban with machshava that I'm going to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow, so that's one machshava. So kilu. It was a gewaldige svara from Rava that if you think about it, the machshava of I'm going to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow includes in it also that I'm going to leave it over till tomorrow so that I could do Zrikas Adam tomorrow, and yet it's still pigul. But he didn't spell that out, that I'm going to leave it over, right? He says, I'm going to do Zrikas Adam tomorrow. That's machshavas chutz zmano. And then when he does Zrikas Adam now, it establishes it as pigul. But I can argue that if Rabbi Yehuda says that a machshava that I'm going to do If Rabbi Yehuda says that a machshava of I'm going to leave this blood overnight makes the korban pasul, and he has that machshava during shchita, I'm going to leave his blood overnight, and now the korban is pasul, and now during Kabbalah Sadam he says I'm going to do Zrikas Sadam tomorrow, I can understand why it would be pasul rather than pigul, because it's two separate machshavas, right? Again, when he only has the machshava of I'm going to do Zrikas Sadam tomorrow, so I understand. So okay, so his machshava is chutz zman, I'm going to do Zrikas Sadam tomorrow, so it's pasul. But I can understand the argument to be said that if he first has the machshava of I'm going to leave it overnight, and now the korban is pasul, and then he has the machshava of I'm going to do Zrikas Dam tomorrow, it wouldn't be pigul since the korban is already pasul. I can understand why you can argue that unlike Reb Abba, and that the korban would not be pigul, it would be pasul. So Eis Rav Huna le Reb Abba. Wow. So now Rav Huna asks a very interesting question on Reb Abba. Again, Reb Abba had said that even though Rabbi Yehuda says that slaughtering the korban with the machshava of leaving it overnight makes the korban pasul, says Rav Abba, if he does Kabbalah Sadam with the intention of chutz zmano, it would still be pigul. Now, Rav Huna asks a question for the following brisa. Litin esanitonin limayla. If a person slaughters a korban with the machshava, person slaughters a korban, and when he's slaughtering the korban, he has the machshava litenes anitonin lemata, that he says, okay, I'm slaughtering the korban, and when it comes time to zrikas adam, I'm going to, if the dam is supposed to be above the chut sikra, I'm going to do it below the chut sikra. Below the chut sikra, I'm going to do it above the chut sikra. Le'alter kosher. So if that intention is for now, it's not chutz l'zman or not chutz l'komo, keilu, he's just saying, I'm slaughtering the korban, and when I'm going to do kabbalah sadam, malach sadam, when it comes to zrikas adam, I'm going to do zrikas adam on the wrong part of the mizbeach. That machshava is not going to make the korban pasul. It's going to be a kosher korban. It's not chutz l'zman or chutz l'komo. Now, chazer v'chishev chutz l'komo, and since that initial machshava of I'm going to do Zrikas Dam in the wrong part of the Mizbeach is irrelevant, well then if he then does Kabbalah Sadam with the machshava of Chutz Limkomo, the korban will be pasul, and if it's machshava Chutz Lizmano, it will be pigul, because the korban wasn't pasul from the original machshava of the wrong part of the Mizbeach. It was still kosher. So then when he does Kabbalah Sadam with the intention of Chutz Lizmano, so it'll be pigul. And it'll be chiv kares. Now, if it's limacher, if he slaughters the korban with the intention of I'm going to do zrikas adam tomorrow on the wrong part of the mizbeach, well then we say pasul. Then we say pasul, right? That if a person slaughters a korban with the intention of doing Zrikas Adam tomorrow, which normally would be pigul, but on the wrong part of the Mizbeach, so it's pasul. Chazer v'chishev, if now he does the Kabbalah Sadam, and he does Chishev bein chutz zmano, bein chutz l'mkomo, pasul ve'en bokaris. Tiyuvta d'Rabba tiyuvta. Does anybody want to explain this to me? Anybody want to explain this? Not just to me, but to the whole world. Cheve, if you explain this Gemara, you're explaining it to everybody who listens to Babble on Talmud, Chevra. So we just said that. So if a person slaughters a korban with the intention of doing Zrikas Adam tomorrow, a person slaughters a korban with the intention of doing Zrikas Adam tomorrow, but on the wrong part of the Mizbeach, we say that the korban is pasul. Now, if then after that, right, that was by the shchita, if then by the Kabbalah Sadam he has intention of chutz l'mkomo or even chutz l'zmano, still the korban is pasul. It's not pigul. Now, on Daf Chav Zayin, 10 days ago, we had a whole discussion about this brisa. Essentially, where we landed at the end of this brisa was that he was having an intention of hinuach. It was a Gemara on Daf Chav Zayin. It was a whole back and forth, because if Chutz L'Mkomo is really Kimkomo, well then, why should it even be pigul in the first place? Well, we say because, well, whatever, since in order for it to be pigul, it would have to be something that you would actually be able to eat. Whatever, it was a whole thing. It was a whole back and forth. I'm not going to get into that Gemara right now. But basically, the maskana of the Gemara was that the machshava was a machshava sinuach, which is essentially what Rabbi Yehuda is saying over here. And what did so if we're saying that brisa is talking about dafka machshava of hinuach, like Rabbi Yehuda is talking about, and what did we just say? That if then subsequently you have machshava of chutz lizmano, it would not be pigul. It would be puzzle. Rabbi Abba had said that if, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you have machshava of during the shechita of machshava sinuach, the korban would be puzzle. But if then during the Kabbalah you have machshava of chutz lizmano, says Rabbi Abba, would still be pigul. However, with this brisa, which we established, which on Daf Chav Zayin we conclude is talking about machshava sinuach, and we say that if you have machshava sinuach, essentially to leave the blood till tomorrow, and then that was by shechita, and then by the Kabbalah you have machshava of chutz lizmano, so we say it would not be pigul, and therefore it's a kasha on Reb Abba. Amr Rav Chizda says Rav Chizda, Amr Ravina Bar Sila, Chishev she'ochlu tmeim l'macher chayiv. Okay, says Rav Chizda and Rav Ravina Bar Sila that if a person slaughters a korban with the intention that tmeim are going to eat it tomorrow, that would be considered chutz lizmano. Amar Rava says Rava Teda de Basar Lifnei Zrika Lo Chazi, and says Rava, well, you should know, because if you think about it, when is the time that you have machsheves chutz lizmano? At the time of shechita. The time of shechita, you can't actually eat the meat yet. Right? You can only eat the meat. The meat only becomes permitted, right? Actually, karvu matirav. What's matirav, right? All the avodas sadam is called the matirin. Well, once the zrika sadam is complete, at that point the korban becomes eatable. So therefore, at the time that you're having machsheves chutz lizmano, at the time they have machsheves chutz lizmano bechlal, this is anyways, it's meat that's not allowed to be eaten, and still it's going to be pigul. Right? So Amrava Teda the basar lifnei zrika, meat before zrika sadam anyways lo chazi, v'chi mechashe mifsil, and yet when you have machshav of chutz lizmano becomes pigul. So veloi. So therefore, we want to say the same thing over here, that when you have a kavana of tmeim are going to eat it, it makes no difference. It's also going to be pigul. Veloi, but that's not really a good argument. Hasam zarik umechze. Look, when it comes to pigul and a person slaughters the korban with the kavana of chutz lizmano, and we say, well, you can't technically eat the meat yet, but once you do zrika sadam, the meat will be edible. Hachal umechze klal, but meat to a tummy person is never going to be permitted, and therefore these are apples and oranges to the extent that this raya from pigul for a kavana of a tummy eating the meat, it's different, because the tummy is never allowed to eat the meat, whereas while by pigul the meat is not edible now, but after zrika sadam it will be edible to people who are allowed to eat it. Amr Rav Chizda says Rav Chizda margle befume de Rav Dimi bar Chinna, who is the pearl in the mouth of Rav Dimi bar Chinna. Besar Pesach shlo hutzla, that if we're talking about korban Pesach that was not roasted, korban Pesach needs to be roasted. It wasn't roasted, so therefore you can't eat it. V'lach metoda shlo hurmu, and also the 40 loaves of a korban toda. Korban toda came with 40 loaves, 4 types of loaves of korban minchas, basically 11 loaves, bread loaves. There were 4 different types of loaves, and one of each type would be given to a kohen. And before then, you can't eat them. Chayav alein mishum tumah. A person who is tamei and eats these, right? Eats a korban pesach that hasn't been roasted, or these breads of a toda that where the kohen haven't taken their part from yet. If a person eats it in a state of tumah, he's chayav. Amrava Teda says, you should know the Tana that we learned in the Brisa Asher La Hashem. That we learn from Asher LaHashem that the emurim of kochim kalim. So, for example, the the parts of a korban shlomim, for example, that would be burnt on the mizbeach, if a tamid person eats those, he's chayiv. So we see that even though murim are not things that you normally eat, they're both supposed to be burnt on the mizbeach. Nonetheless, chayiv and aleim b'shum tuma. If a tamid person eats them, he's still going to be chayiv. So achanami is here also by the unroasted korban pesach, or by these loaves of a toda that the kohen hasn't taken his loaves yet. Even though you can't eat these loaves or korban pesach yet, chayiv and aleim b'shum tuma, you'll still be chayiv for tuma veloi. But again, that isn't a good analogy, which is very interesting, by the way. I feel like it's hard to get Rava to trip up. It seems like it's funny. And Rava is saying, "Oh, you should know he's bringing all these rayas," and we're like proving him wrong. I feel like Rava doesn't get proved wrong so often, which is so interesting. Where it's just like he's bringing all these rayas that are being like proven wrong. It doesn't seem very Rava-like. But anyways, Viloi, but that's not the case. Also, Meimuri Kachim Kalim Chazu Legavo. That when it comes to the emurim of a kachim kalim, of a shlom, for example, while people can't eat them, Hashem eats them, burn them on the mizbeach. As opposed to a korban pesach that was not roasted, or the lach mitoda that the truma that the loaves weren't given to the kohanim yet. Nobody can eat them yet. So therefore, in that, right, that makes them different than the emurim of kachim kalim. And then the agos abach changes the parentheses to the shnachrina. Alternatively, veloi, that something is hani emurim chazu lemosayu hani lo chazu klal. That the emurim that are meant to be burnt in the mizbeach, so there's something to do with them. Burn them on the mizbeach, where you could do with them what you're supposed to do with them. Burn them on the mizbeach. But according to Pesach that has not been roasted, or the loaves of a toda that the parts that the breads haven't been given to the kohen yet, there's nothing you can do with them. So therefore, it makes those cases different and uncomparable. Hadron Allah call Hapsulin. We'll come back to your parak. Call Hapsulin. That was Daf Lamed Vav, Daf 36 of Masechta Zevachim. We learned a new Mishnah. The first part of the Mishnah was a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Tanakama about you have machshava at the time of shchita that you're going to leave the blood overnight, or leave the emurim overnight, or take it out of, or that you're simply just going to take them out of the azar but not do anything with them. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Pasul the chacham say it's kosher." The Mishnah then continues to talk about, doing zvikas dam with the wrong part of the mizbeach, or the kavana that tamei people can eat it, or oral people can eat it. All those cases are kosher. The Gemara, the Mishnah then concludes with a principle that the only scenarios where a korban will be pasul was if you have machshava chutz lizmano or chutz limkomo, or a chatas or a korban pesach that was slaughtered with machshava shelo lishma. Otherwise, it's kosher. Now, that initial machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chacham regarding machshavas hinuach, of just simply leaving the blood or the emurim overnight, really became the focus of the daf, which then took us to the end of the parak. We wanted to know, where does Rabbi Yehuda's opinion come from? We then wanted to, which ultimately said is svara. We then wanted to know, maybe Rabbi Yehuda should argue about all the things in the Mishnah, to which we went one by one and said that no, he wouldn't argue about these things. We saw the opinion of Rabbi Babble, who wanted to argue that according to Rabbi Yehuda, even if he has machshavas hinuach and the korban is pasul, still if he has machshava, let's say by Kabbalah of chutz lizmanu, it could still be pigul, to which we then had interesting arguments. Rava made arguments for. We then had a brisa to prove against, which were kind of interesting arguments there, and some other kind of related, topics came up towards the end to get us to the end of the daf, and we concluded the third parak of Masechta Zevachim. I will catch you tomorrow for the beginning of the fourth. Have a good one. Cheers.